Welcome to Security.com, the podcast where we're bringing together in-depth intel, real talk, and the human side of cybersecurity. I'm your host, Dan Mellinger, and each episode I'll be joined by industry experts, defenders, and voices from the front lines to explore the latest enterprise security insights straight from the pages of Security.com and the minds shaping the field. Today we have a particularly interesting new development, but with me, as always, Dick O'Brien. So one of our best and brightest threat researchers here at Symantec and Carbon Black. And we're talking about the Spiegel Infostealer. So essentially a novel new kind of parasite that's hunting for very specific information.
Yes. I have to say, I think this is probably the most interesting piece of malware that we've seen in a couple of years. It was quite exciting to work on it, because it's a bit different from what you usually see. The reason we found it is that there's this software called Cobra DocGuard. You've probably never heard of it, but it's widely used in China. It's a kind of security software. It's like data loss prevention software, DLP software. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it's used outside of China at all. But it has been subject to at least 2 supply chain attacks. One identified by ESET a couple of years ago, one that we found ourselves a little while later. So we knew that this software has been breached twice. So,
you keep an eye on it.
Chances are it might be breached a third time.
Yeah.
So we were keeping an eye out for threats that may be leveraging it. We kind of would periodically check in. So we found this threat on VirusTotal, and it appeared to be using Cobra DocGuard. So we got a sample of it and started analyzing it. And it's a really interesting bit of malware. So it seems to be configured to only infect people who use this software. So they're obviously trying to target people mainly in China, so it's quite targeted in that effect. Now, we don't actually know if this is a supply chain attack. We think it may be, just sort of given the fact that it's designed to only infect users of that particular software, and the way it uses some of Cobra DocGuard's functionality means it probably could have been pushed down through a malicious software update after the attackers compromised Cobra DocGuard themselves. But we haven't been able to confirm that.
Sweet.
So it may come in a supply chain format, but then what it does when it gets up and running, it checks to see if Cobra DocGuard is there, and if it isn't there, it doesn't run. And then it starts gathering information from the infected computer. And what it does then is quite clever. It gets all the stolen information and it formats it in the structure that's called error report. And that error report is sent back to a Cobra DocGuard server. So the attackers obviously have control of the server belonging to Cobra DocGuard. And, if you were kind of looking at the traffic going to this Cobra DocGuard server, you would see something called error report. So if you drilled into it, you'd realize it isn't an error report.
But
on first glance, it looks pretty... It looks pretty innocuous, for example.
Software sending an error report back to its servers.
So it kind of does a couple of sweeps and then uploads the information, does another sweep for more information, and then uploads it. And then it does something quite interesting. Then it uses Cobra DocGuard's own driver to delete itself after it's done. So it cleans up after itself, which again is kind of unusual. Most of the time, malware authors, they don't really care about it being discovered. So cleaning up after yourself is usually, good OPSEC.
Yeah.
So
sophisticated actors,
like the kind of a cut above what we usually come across. Mm-hmm. We found it really, really interesting, and we were already going to write a report about this because, as I said, this isn't the kind of thing you see every day. And then right at the end, we realized that when we were looking more in depth at its functionality, about what kind of information it was trying to find, on infected computers, we found a list of keywords that it wanted to get documents mentioning these keywords. Most of them were in Chinese. And then we translated them, and it's like all of the names, the designations of various Chinese ballistic missiles, keywords relating like warhead, you know, thermal control system, tailspin, all of those things, you know. And as I said, like this was right at the end, and we were about to publish the report. It was like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah.
So you know, so we have a bit of malware that's designed to only work in China and designed to hunt for information only around Chinese ballistic missiles.
And then clean up after itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah, you know, the obvious question is who is it?
Yeah, so that's I mean, so the obvious one, right, would be like, this sounds like something that, like U.S. government.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and people are going to ask that question. And we have no idea who is behind this. Genuinely, there's no fingerprints there that links this to any other known threat or group. And that's unusual in itself. Like usually, you know, when you discover a new threat, even if you're not sure about the, you know, the attribution, you can usually make an educated guess of, you know, about who it is, just based on some small similarities and tactics and things like that. But no, this is a complete,
very clean
blank slate, you know.
Which again, advanced actor.
It's unusual. But no, it could be any nation state, really, you know. Because it could be a strategic rival to China, and they have several of them, who's trying to kind of keep tabs on where their missile technology is at the moment. But it could be somebody else who's trying to develop their own ballistic missile technologies and kind of get there militarily, and kind of, you know, so they want to steal some intellectual property to take some shortcuts along the road to development there. So there's a whole bunch of countries it could be. And then the other alternative is that this may be some private individual who's cooked this up in the hope of finding some valuable information that they could maybe sell on the black market to people who want to develop their own ballistic missiles, for example.
Interesting.
But yeah, you know, it just, we're completely in the dark as to who's behind it. And there's a long, you know, endless list of potential suspects.
Yeah, interesting. Well, and particularly like the individual one, it would kind of make sense why you'd want to clean up after yourself and keep everything super clean, because that's criminal, right?
Yeah. Oh,
like excessively criminal, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think even if you aren't based in China, I think doing things like this is legally dubious in lots of other countries. Not alone accessing this sort of information, but then trying to sell it to countries that may be hostile to the country you're living in, for example.
I imagine it would put you on a lot of lists. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, from your perspective, do you see, are you guys going to keep a lookout for kind of more of these type of?
Yes. Yeah. I think now that we're calling this actor Runningcrab. We have to give them a name, so we're calling them Runningcrab. We give everybody a name.
Yeah.
And what they've done so far is really interesting. So needless to say, we're on the lookout for anything that may be potentially linked to Runningcrab, because, you know, doubtless this is not the first, you know, operation that they've staged, or the first piece of malware that they're created. And we're hoping that by putting this report out, that we have maybe one jigsaw piece, and that maybe we can, you know, uncover a few more jigsaw pieces, or maybe, you know, some of our peers may be able to kind of find something themselves.
Interesting, yeah, because it's someone this, I guess, advanced, right? This is almost certainly not the first thing that they've done.
Yeah. This isn't their first rodeo. You know, you can tell that. You know, like they're pretty sophisticated. They're not maybe right up there with the most sophisticated thing we've ever seen, but they're pretty good. You know, so they've obviously been doing this for a while.
Do you think you'll be able to, you know, since it's fairly clean, it's designed to like, kind of hide any kind of fingerprinting.
Yeah.
What do you think, do you think you guys will be able to kind of crack the case with another one if it were as, I guess?
It's a good question. I think, our best hope is finding more historic stuff that they've done, but if this person or people are kind of as good as they appear, I think they will completely retool and try and kind of start from a fresh slate, because that's best practice in this sort of thing is that you leave no clues behind you.
Interesting. Well, I guess if I am a Chinese company that's using Cobra DocGuard, what should I do?
Don't use it.
It's 3 times enough. Find something else.
Yeah. I mean, a supply chain attack is pretty reputationally damaging, and I think if they've already been subjected to 2 and now possibly 3, that's a really bad sign,
Particularly for a DLP product.
Yeah, I know.
I wouldn't trust that one anymore.
It's not a good look. Yeah.
Awesome. Did you have any closing thoughts or takeaways from this one?
No, I mean, I think we cover all of it off. I mean, I love talking about this one. I find it really intriguing. And I really hope that we find a little bit more information about this actor and maybe uncover some new tools. So
awesome.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. If anyone out there finds anything, send it to Dick. We will dig very, very deep. And that's a wrap on this episode of Security.com, the podcast. So big thanks, Dick, as always. You can check out more insights and technical deep dives, including this article where we break this down on Security.com. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the show with your fellow defenders. Thanks for watching. And remember, stay sharp, stay curious, and stay human.